In the mid-1980s, a reign of terror gripped California as the Night Stalker unleashed a wave of brutal violence that left both Los Angeles and San Francisco communities in a state of fear and panic. Richard Ramirez, the man behind these heinous crimes, was a sadistic predator whose actions not only shattered lives but also exposed deep-seated fears in society. This is the chilling and detailed story of Richard Ramirez, from his tumultuous early years to his infamous crime spree, and the relentless pursuit by law enforcement that finally brought him to justice. Childhood and family background. Richard Ramirez was born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, to Julian and Mercedes Ramirez, the youngest of 5 siblings. His father, a former Mexican police officer, had a violent temper and often took out his frustrations on his children. Richard's early years were marked by frequent physical abuse, both at the hands of his father and later at school. His mother worked long hours in a boot factory, which exposed her to toxic chemicals, leading to complications during her pregnancies. This rough environment set the stage for Richard's troubled life. The influence of Mike Ramirez. One of the most significant influences in Richard's life was his cousin, Mike Ramirez, a decorated Vietnam War veteran. Mike returned from the war with severe PTSD and shared horrific stories of his time in Vietnam with Richard, showing him graphic photos of tortured and mutilated women. Mike boasted about his actions, further romanticizing violence in Richard's young mind. The final and most impactful moment came when Richard witnessed Mike shoot his wife, Jessie, in the face during a domestic argument. Richard, just 13 years old, was forever scarred by this incident. Teenage years and the descent into darkness. After witnessing the murder, Richard's behavior became increasingly erratic. He became obsessed with Satanism and the occult, finding solace and identity in the imagery and beliefs of Satan worship. He started using drugs heavily, especially marijuana and LSD, which only fueled his antisocial tendencies. Richard dropped out of high school and began committing petty crimes such as theft and burglary. His drug use and criminal behavior led to multiple arrests, but he often escaped harsh punishment, allowing his darker urges to grow unchecked. Moving to California. In his early 20s, Ramirez moved to California, where he initially drifted through various cities, living a transient lifestyle. He spent his nights using cocaine, committing burglaries to support his habit, and engaging in increasingly violent behavior. It was during this time that his fascination with sexual violence and Satanism became more pronounced. The move to California marked the beginning of his transformation from a petty criminal into a full-blown predator. Early crimes and signs of a serial killer. Ramirez's first known murder occurred on April 10, 1984, when he sexually assaulted and murdered 9-year-old Mei Liang in the basement of a hotel in San Francisco. This heinous crime, which remained unsolved for many years, marked the beginning of his deadly path. However, it was not until a year later that Ramirez would embark on the series of murders that would define his legacy as the Night Stalker. The first murders, setting the pattern. Jenny Vincao, June 28, 1980, for the first murder attributed to the Night Stalker took place when Ramirez entered the Los Angeles home of Jenny Vincao, 79, through an open window. He stabbed her repeatedly, slashed her throat, and sexually assaulted her post-mortem. The brutality of the crime shocked investigators, who noted the ferocity of the attack. 1985, a year of terror in Los Angeles. The Night Stalker's killing spree officially began in Los Angeles in 1985. The initial wave of terror struck on June 28, 1984, when 79-year-old Jenny Vincao was found brutally murdered in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. Ramirez had entered through an open window, stabbing Jenny repeatedly and slitting her throat so deeply she was almost decapitated. The crime scene bore evidence of sexual assault, indicating the killer's twisted motives. Maria Hernandez and Dale Okazaki, March 17, 1985. Hernandez, 22, was attacked in her home in Rosemead. She survived by instinctively raising her hands, and the bullet deflected off her keys. Ramirez shot her roommate, Dale Okazaki, 34, fatally in the head when she tried to hide. Following the murders, Ramirez attacked another woman, Silene, in her car, pulling her out and shooting her, which left her dead. Vincent and Maxine Zazera. March 27, 1985. The elderly couple in Whittier were found by their son. Vincent, 64, was shot in his sleep, and Maxine, 44, was tortured, mutilated, and her eyes gouged out. Ramirez carved a T-shape into Maxine's breast and left the house with valuables. The sheer brutality of this crime shocked investigators and established Ramirez's penchant for extreme violence. William and Lily Doy. May 14, 1985. William Doy, 66, was shot and beaten, and his wife Lily, 56, was brutally assaulted. Lily was able to crawl to a phone and call 911, providing the first live report of a Night Stalker attack. Ramirez's MO involved killing the male partner swiftly to exert control over the situation, then focusing his sadistic intentions on the female victim. Mabel, Ma, Belle, and Florence, Nettie Lang. May 29, 1985. In Monrovia, Ramirez bludgeoned 83-year-old Mabel Bell to death with a hammer and left her sister, Florence, severely injured. He drew a pentagram on Mabel's thigh and on the walls, solidifying the satanic elements of his crimes. The fear spreads. As the body count rose, so did public fear. Media outlets reported daily on the Night Stalker, and a climate of panic enveloped Southern California. Citizens armed themselves, installed security systems, and formed neighborhood watch groups. The randomness of Ramirez's targets, men, women, children, the elderly, made everyone feel vulnerable. Ramirez was dubbed the Night Stalker by the press, a name that would become synonymous with terror. Patterns of behavior and signature. Ramirez's pattern was terrifyingly consistent. He would strike at night, entering homes through windows or doors that were left open for ventilation during the warm Californian summer. He typically used a variety of weapons, including guns, knives, hammers, and even a tire iron, depending on what was available. His attacks included shooting, stabbing, bludgeoning, and sexual assault. Ramirez often left satanic symbols at the scenes, including inverted pentagrams and cryptic messages, further deepening the sense of dread he inspired. Victim profile and method of operation. Unlike many serial killers, Ramirez did not have a specific victim profile based on age, gender, or ethnicity. His primary criterion was accessibility, making him particularly dangerous. This unpredictability confounded law enforcement and heightened public fear. Ramirez's method often involved shooting the male victim if present, then sexually assaulting and torturing the female victim. Afterward, he would ransack the home, taking valuables as trophies and often eating or drinking from the victims' kitchens, which displayed his utter contempt for his victims. Law enforcement mobilizes. The investigation into the Night Stalker murders was a massive undertaking involving multiple jurisdictions. The Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and other law enforcement agencies across Southern California coordinated their efforts. Detectives Frank Salerno and Gil Carrillo of the LAPD's Homicide Division were assigned to the case, and they played pivotal roles in piecing together the evidence that would eventually lead to Ramirez's capture. Linking the crimes. A critical breakthrough in the investigation came when forensic experts identified a consistent footprint left at several crime scenes, a size 11.5 obvious sneaker print. This was a rare shoe at the time, narrowing down the list of potential suspects. The detectives also used ballistic evidence, matching bullets and shell casings from different crime scenes to the same gun, which linked multiple murders to a single perpetrator. Public fear and media involvement. The investigation. The media frenzy often led to misinformation and sensationalism, which sometimes hindered the police's efforts to conduct their investigation discreetly. Despite this, the coverage also kept the case in the public eye, leading to increased pressure on the authorities to solve the crimes quickly. The name Night Stalker was coined by the press, cementing the sinister persona of the killer in the public's mind. The relentless media attention turned the manhunt into a high-profile case, with daily updates becoming a staple in news broadcasts. Surviving victims and witnesses. While Ramirez left behind a trail of death, a few victims survived his attacks and provided valuable information to the police. These survivors described their assailant as having bad breath and a distinct foul odor, which was consistent with Ramirez's neglected hygiene. Notably, one of the surviving victims, Maria Hernandez, was able to give a clear description of Ramirez's face after he attacked her and her roommate, Dale Okazaki, on March 17, 1985. This description led to the creation of a composite sketch, which was circulated throughout the Los Angeles area. Breakthrough and identification. The turning point in the investigation came on August 24, 1985. Ramirez had just committed an attack in Mission Viejo, where he shot Bill Carnes, 30, and raped his fiancée, Inez Erickson, 29. Erickson, although severely injured, survived and provided a detailed description of the attacker and the car he had been driving, a stolen orange Toyota. This information was broadcast on television, leading to a critical break in the case. The next day, the car was located, abandoned, and fingerprints were lifted from the rearview mirror. These prints were quickly matched to Richard Ramirez, whose fingerprints were already on file from previous arrests for theft and drug possession. The mugshot release and public alert. With Ramirez positively identified, police released his mugshot from a prior arrest to the media on August 29, 1985. The LAPD held a press conference to alert the public that the Night Stalker had been identified as Richard Ramirez, a 25-year-old drifter from Texas. This public alert served two purposes. It warned the community and pressured Ramirez, who is now a marked man. His face was plastered across newspapers, television screens, and wanted posters throughout California, making it nearly impossible for him to move undetected. The dramatic capture. Richard Ramirez's capture was as dramatic as his crimes. On August 31, 1985, Ramirez, unaware that his identity had been exposed, returned to Los Angeles from a visit to his brother in Tucson, Arizona. As he walked through the streets of East Los Angeles, he noticed his face on the front pages of newspapers and people pointing at him. Realizing that he was recognized, he attempted to carjack a vehicle, but was thwarted by the owner. Ramirez fled on foot, running through the streets, attempting to evade capture. Residents, alerted to his presence and fueled by anger and fear, began chasing Ramirez. He was eventually surrounded by a group of bystanders who apprehended him in a residential neighborhood. They beat him until police arrived, taking him into custody. The citizens of East Los Angeles played a crucial role in capturing one of the most feared criminals in American history, ending his reign of terror. Legal proceedings and the trial. Ramirez's trial began on July 22, 1988, after several delays, including changes in his legal representation. The trial was a media spectacle, attracting national and international attention. Ramirez, with his long, unkempt hair and dark eyes, often dressed in black, played up his image as a demonic figure. He taunted victims' families, made satanic gestures, and even drew a pentagram on his hand, flashing it to the court with a shout of "Hail Satan." The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence against Ramirez, including testimonies from surviving victims, forensic evidence like shoe prints and fingerprints, and witness statements. The trial was long and arduous, lasting over a year and costing more than $1.8 million, making it one of the most expensive trials in California history at the time. The verdict. On September 20, 1989, after 22 months of trial proceedings, Ramirez was convicted of 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 counts of sexual assault, and 14 counts of burglary. The jury also found him guilty of numerous other charges related to the assaults and home invasions. He was sentenced to death in the gas chamber. Upon hearing the verdict, Ramirez showed no remorse. He famously responded to his sentence by saying, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland." The aftermath of the trial. The trial's conclusion brought a sense of relief to the people of Los Angeles and the surrounding areas. However, the emotional and psychological scars left by Ramirez's crimes lingered. Many survivors and families of the victims continued to suffer from the trauma of the Night Stalker's brutal actions. Ramirez was sent to California's San Quentin State Prison, where he would remain on death row. Ramirez's time on death row. Richard Ramirez spent the remainder of his life on death row at San Quentin State Prison. Despite the death sentence, Ramirez's execution was continuously postponed due to California's lengthy appeals process and the legal complexities surrounding the death penalty. While imprisoned, Ramirez maintained a following of sorts, receiving fan mail from people fascinated by his infamy. Some women even wrote love letters and proposed marriage to him, a phenomenon often observed with notorious criminals. In 1996, Ramirez married one of his supporters, Doreen Leoie, in a prison ceremony. Leoie, a magazine editor, was captivated by Ramirez's dark allure, believing in his innocence despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Their marriage and her public declarations of his innocence added another bizarre layer to the Night Stalker's legacy: health issues and death. In his later years, Ramirez's health began to decline. He was diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma, a type of blood cancer, and also suffered from chronic hepatitis C, a liver disease likely contracted due to his drug use. On June 7, 2013, Ramirez died at Marin General Hospital in Greenbury, California, from complications related to his illnesses. He was 53 years old and had spent nearly 24 years on death row. Ramirez's death brought a final end to the life of one of America's most feared serial killers. Cultural impact and legacy. The Night Stalker case had a profound and lasting impact on American society and culture. Richard Ramirez's crimes influenced countless films, documentaries, books, and TV shows exploring the psychology of serial killers. His case highlighted the vulnerability of urban populations to random acts of violence and underscored the importance of forensic science in solving crimes. Ramirez's chilling persona, his ties to Satanism, and his complete lack of remorse contributed to the mythos of the boogeyman figure in popular culture. The Night Stalker case also left a legacy in law enforcement. The LAPD and other agencies involved in the investigation developed more sophisticated methods for handling serial crimes, emphasizing interagency communication and the use of emerging forensic technologies, which have since become standard practice in criminal investigations. The Night Stalker's place in history. Estimated time: 5 minutes. A symbol of fear and evil. Richard Ramirez's name remains synonymous with fear and evil. His crimes shattered the notion of safety within one's own home and brought to light the darkest aspects of human nature. Unlike other serial killers who targeted specific types of victims, Ramirez's randomness in choosing his prey made him a universal threat. His brutal methods, lack of a consistent victim profile, and satanic associations painted him as a real-life monster, a living nightmare that haunted the streets of Los Angeles. The impact on victims' families and society. The families of Ramirez's victims continue to deal with the emotional aftermath of his actions. The loss of loved ones to such senseless violence left many grappling with grief and trauma long after Ramirez was captured and convicted. For the broader society, the Night Stalker case was a grim reminder of the existence of evil and the importance of vigilance. It spurred changes in how people approached home security, leading to increased sales of security systems and a greater awareness of personal safety. Lessons learned. Law enforcement agencies learned valuable lessons from the Night Stalker investigation. The importance of sharing information across jurisdictions and the effectiveness of public appeals for help were crucial takeaways. The case also highlighted the power of community involvement in capturing dangerous criminals, as seen when local residents apprehended Ramirez in East Los Angeles. Ending: the dark legacy of Richard Ramirez. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, remains one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. His reign of terror left an indelible mark on society, one that continues to be felt in the collective memory of those who lived through the fear he instilled. The stories of his victims, the trauma of the survivors, and the tireless efforts of law enforcement to bring him to justice serve as a testament to the resilience of those affected by his crimes. The Night Stalker's dark legacy is a reminder of the thin line between normalcy and chaos, between the safety of our homes and the intrusion of unspeakable horror. As we reflect on his life and crimes, we are